Welcome back to Wall Street Week. During this election season, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and even Donald Trump have had less than nice things to say about Wall Street. The Obama administration has even scuttled some proposed mergers. We all know what's happened with the war on coal and what it's done to that industry.
And just this week, Bernie Sanders blasting Disney, saying it helps to create income inequality, prompting a sharp response from CEO Bob Iger. Let's bring in the Fox Business All-Stars, Liz Claman and Charlie Gasparino. Charlie, it's probably going to get worse this election season, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, nothing's off limits. Disney. I mean, you really,
princesses.
You really know that you got to be a real disgusting Stalinist socialist to attack Disney of all companies. The companies that, you know, this is a very progressive company. I mean, they were among the first to embrace gay rights. I mean, Bob Iger is far from some right-wing lunatic, and this knucklehead goes out there and, you know, I'll tell you, Donald's calling him Crazy Bernie, right? He sounds crazy when he attacks Disney. Now, the overarching theme, though, I think you're right.
Okay, but why is he so popular? Is it an indictment of our public educational system that people don't understand the failures of socialism?
Listen, here's look at what's happening at the Trump rallies. We have leftist kids who are either in college or just left college, violently protesting. You know what's happening here, and this is the scary thing about this election.
But these are paid protests.
But no, some of them are. Some of them are not. Listen, some of Occupy Wall Street, which I covered extensively, was paid. A lot of it wasn't. They were kids, and I think the sort of animosity to free speech that goes on, particularly right-wing free speech that goes on campus, is now basically overflowing to what's going on here, and it's what's going on in the election, and it's very scary.
Anthony, to your point about Disney, you look at Disney, and you can even put Bob Iger aside, go all the way back to Walt Disney, 1965. This is a guy who looked at swampland in Orlando and said, I'm going to build it up, hundreds of thousands of jobs. So Disney and companies like that have done what the government can't seem to do, and that is create jobs. Yeah. Now, when you want to talk about dollars and cents and minimum wage, et cetera, or they don't like the dress code, that seems to be the one big complaint when you go on the websites of people.
Charlie,
what? You can figure those things out.
Let's move away from Disney and talk about Wall Street.
And populism.
Well, just about Wall Street. I mean, you and I have spoken for years. I mean, decades.
Charlie's a huge fan of Wall Street.
In terms of the industry. What's going to happen between now and November in terms of the attacks on this industry, which, as you know, is already under tremendous pressure?
And it's somewhat bipartisan. Your friend Donald Trump, as much as he embraces you, has attacked Wall Street although now that he needs their money, he's kind of backed away a little bit.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, funny how that works.
I don't think it's so much that. I think what it is that
he's tapped into the populism. You know,
but you know what? There's reasons to throw.
Okay, but I'm going to tell you
Wall Street. There have been bad actors.
Some bad actors. But let's rewind the videotape about the financial crisis. What was the financial crisis? Well, if you listen to Michael Lewis and The Big Short, I watched the movie. They must have said Wall Street is ripping off the individual 400 times. Now, as someone who covered that extensively and knows and beat up on Wall Street plenty, I could tell you that it was less of a ripoff and more of banks literally handing money to people that couldn't pay it back.
Right.
That was the scandal. So the average American
that was imposed by the government.
Of course, and that's the problem.
So there was a circuit.
So you have a couple of things going on. You have the liberal media basically proposing propaganda. You have it being basically reiterated and repeated on college campuses, and you have political candidates that are trying to seize on it, some at the far end like Bernie Sanders, and some in a lighter way, like I guess somewhat lighter way in Donald Trump.
But some of this is just conversation, guys. The R word, regulation. If you really want to go to the one thing that has hurt businesses, whether it's Wall Street or whether it's small businesses, it's the tens of thousands of regulations that have been imposed, not just during the Obama administration, but George Bush was hardly sort of a regulatory restraint and a model to be held up to that.
Bernie Marcus says he could not start Home Depot today, Gary, if we had the same regulations.
Let's be real clear here. I mean, the last 8 years, Liz, I mean, you can't compare the regulations that Obama has imposed, particularly on Dodd-Frank, and what's that's done to lending. At the small, I mean, listen, it's hard to get a loan if you're a small business. It's not because of George Bush. I'm not saying George Bush was perfect, but I am telling you, if anything, George Bush, was regulatory, light compared to what's going on now.
Liz, Charlie brought up about the housing crisis, and one of the highlights of this past week was the Clinton campaign released this commercial where they had Donald Trump with a soundbite saying that he hoped that housing prices went down. And then his end of that was that because he is a buyer of assets when they go down. Did you think that that backfired as far as trying to rile people up?
No,
what was your thought of that?
People who are in the real estate industry at certain points love to see prices go down so they can scoop things up at good prices. We've talked to Ara Hovnanian of Hovnanian over the past several years. During the crisis, you had the actual plots of land going way down in price, and the first thing they thought was, and this wasn't just Hovnanian, a lot of these home builders wanted to go in and buy. That's what you do, 7 years of feast, and then you buy during the famine.
I think it will be, and here's where it will be. Here's where I think it will be. It's not politically effective now. She's got a problem. She's got Bernie Sanders, right? So she's actually fighting two opponents right now. But when it comes, if she doesn't get indicted, which is always a possibility given all this email stuff we keep reading, so she stays in office, she gets Bernie Sanders out of the way, that type of argument does resonate with a lot of people. Romney faced that argument and got crushed.
I think it failed, Charlie. I think it failed.
It's different.
You spent the week. You traveled with Donald this week.
I traveled.
So what did he say when that came out?
Well, he said it in New Mexico. He said that, listen, I'm a business person. That's what business people are supposed to do. I think people want the problems fixed, and I think this will be an election.
Right, but I will say,
who's going to best fix the problems? And by the way, the problems are in the lower and the middle class.
Yeah, but you know, those are the people
Gary.
most susceptible to that class warfare argument. I'm going to say this. I think we should kind of tune out essentially what's happening now to a certain extent and think about what it's going to be if Clinton goes against Trump directly. These type of arguments do resonate, and that's where he's going to have that's where it's going to be rubber meets the road. Now, a lot can happen between now and then. Bernie Sanders is not giving up. He's allowing Trump.
What if Bernie Sanders wins California, your home state, Liz? What happens then?
What happens then? That is going to be terrible for Hillary Clinton. But if you're talking about smart money, big money, Barry Diller, for example, has said of IAC, I'm going in, I will spend what it takes to defeat Donald Trump. You just have to listen, they're two New York businessmen. If you don't live in New York, you know that these are two guys who might avoid each other because it's just business.
Barry Diller
really does not like Donald Trump. He will put money in for Hillary. Jeffrey Katzenberg, Eli Broad, these are people who have the coin, and they will fight to make it good for Hillary.
Money hasn't worked yet. Liz and Charlie, thanks for joining us on Wall Street Week.
Statement.
Money has not worked yet. Yep.
Well, next week, our guests are going to be Charles Schwab's chief investment strategist, Liz Ann Saunders, and Mark Asset Management founder, Morris Mark. We'll see you then.